Hi guys, it's Ernest from Proximal Consciousness. How you guys doing today? Got a great subject matter for you. Responsibility. Now, responsibility is one of these subject matters that begins very early. In actuality, responsibility begins at birth, right? It is a child's responsibility to suckle from its mother. It's his or her responsibility to develop an attachment to their mother or father, right? Now, these sort of attachments are supposed to be facilitated by parents, or we could also say those that are in authority, those that have knowledge, right? Responsibility is something that should be encouraged in every person throughout their entire lives, right? It is something that should encourage confidence in an individual, right? Tasks that are, structured enough to motivate someone to do things in their best interest or in the best interest of society, right? Responsibility is something that we all have to deal with, and we all have to understand the boundaries of it, right? But the most important aspect of responsibility is that in handling our own senses and our own minds, right? We as individuals have the responsibility to discern what is right and what is wrong. We have to discern who the authority is in our lives or in our span of existence. Who that authority is that sets the boundaries for what is right or wrong. Right? Every person, young, middle-aged, or old, should be told that they are responsible for their own thoughts, right? Their own beliefs, their own actions and reactions. They should be told that growing up they're responsible for being responsible, for following directions, for giving out directions. Responsibility is a big thing to deal with in our lives. I mean, when you're talking about the human senses and the responsibility of an individual in utilizing those human senses to accomplish their everyday activities, that their individuals are responsible for their own cleanliness, to know when they're clean and when they're not clean, to understand how much cleaning to do for themselves. They're responsible for what they eat, when they eat, how they eat, how much they eat. It's their responsibility. And there are boundaries that should be followed. Individuals are responsible for knowing who to be friends with and who not to be. What to do within those boundaries of a friendship and what not to do. Human beings are responsible for their education, to know the benefits of their education, to know when education is adequate, and to know when an education is inadequate, right? They have to understand those boundaries, how much socializing is right for them and how much isn't. It's the responsibility of an individual to select a career that is adequate for them, one that develops them in the ways that they want to be developed. They have to know how they want to be developed. They have to take responsibility for their own lives. Now, of course, there are people who take on too much responsibility, sometimes too early in life, sometimes throughout their entire lives. And taking on too much responsibility can cause people to turn away from being responsible, right? But once again, that's their choice. That's their responsibility, no matter what. It's their responsibility to understand that, wait, well, that's too much responsibility. I'm not going to take that on. I'm going to cut back here and there and there and here. That's their responsibility. But nevertheless, that kind of thing happens. There are many, many people in this world who behave in an irresponsible manner merely because when they were young they took on too much responsibility, things that they could not handle, that they could not think through and feel through, and they just turned off from it. And that's been their pattern of dealings their entire lives, right? But as I said, responsibility for the senses, for what you see, for what you hear, for what you smell and taste and feel, is an individual's responsibility. To know what is real, what is imaginary, to know the boundaries of those senses, to be willing to become an objective person when dealing with not only oneself, but when dealing with others in daily activities. It's important to be responsible for one's own senses, right? To recognize what is true and what is not true. To recognize if something is being said by someone, to get to the facts, to be responsible for what one has heard, or to be responsible for what one has seen, to be able to restate the facts as they truly are, to be able to understand the consequences of actions and reactions as they truly are, right? And to know that when one deviates from that which is to some other situation, you have to be responsible for that, right? All too often we have people existing in our society, people that have been born and raised without ever being told the correct responsibility level that they should have for themselves and that they should see in other people. We haven't been told, and there are people who have not been told how to be responsible in handling situations that you're not supposed to be responsible for. Right? Responsibility is a very big deal. You know? It's sort of like the presidency of the United States and electing officials, congressional figures or whatnot. You know, that is in some cases people's first sense of really truly being responsible for their own country, for their own well-being, going to vote, doing the responsible thing and participating in a society in that kind of way. You know, sets a good example for those people who have to be responsible. People who get up every day for decades to go to work, to take care of their family, showing a sense of responsibility. Yes, and even people who get up every day and go to church on a Sundays. That's a very responsible thing to do. You know? It used to be that a mother and father would carry out their responsibilities to each other and to their family and in front of their children and in the community every single day. That's not always the case any longer. You know? And it used to be that a parent would spell out for a child, for the family, the responsibilities for the day, for the week, the month, the year. In ways, of course, that were structured and useful and beneficial. Parents that just weren't sitting around dictating, but were actually participating in the responsibilities and activities of the day. You know, children used to have, and young adults used to have great role models for responsibility. That's not always the case any longer due to, changing family structures, changing responsibilities, in with the changing family structures. But it nevertheless does not erase the fact that we all have responsibilities for ourselves that begins very young. And it's important for people to research those responsibilities and get those responsibilities right. If when you're driving a vehicle, when you're learning how to drive a car, you have a responsibility of not only having developed the skills to do so and having the innate abilities to do so, having hearing, having visual, having the flexibility and dexterity and the balance to drive, but you also have the responsibility to know what laws exist that help govern the whole freedom to drive. And that's how life is. There are laws that we must live by. There are things that we must obey in order to have the proper outcome in life. We have to take those kinds of responsibilities to follow those kind of rules and regulations and policies and procedures and so on and so forth. We have to make the effort to develop the necessary skills that would guide our senses when it comes to making responsible choices. We have to rely upon our sight, our sound, our ability to speak, our ability to develop relationships, our ability to terminate relationships. All of this comes into play when what? When we're developing responsible habits. Right? Responsibility is a very big deal. And we should learn very early on how to develop a responsible life. Otherwise, we run the risk of being reckless, careless, and destructive, not only to ourselves, but also to others. And that's a big deal. It's a very big deal. So that's the thought that I had today, guys. I hope you guys are liking these videos. I hope you're subscribing to my channel. And I definitely look forward to talking to you guys again soon. So have a good day, guys. Bye now.